The speaker is Shaheen Mistry. She is the founder and CEO of Teach to Lead. Prior to this role, she founded and led the Akanksha Foundation for 17 years with the aim to provide quality education to children from low-income communities. In 2008, she founded Teach for India with the vision to provide excellent education for all children by building a pipeline of leaders committed to ending educational inequity in the country. She is an Ashoka Fellow, Global Leader for Tomorrow at the World Economic Forum, and the Asia Society 21 Leader. She has authored Redrawing India and serves on the boards of Simple Education Foundation, the Akanksha Foundation, Teach to Lead, India School Leadership Institute, Design for Change, Symbiosis School Central Directorate. So now I'll move on to the webinar norms for the day. So from 5:30 to 6:10 for around 40 minutes, we'll be asking the questions from the response sheet. So we had sent out a survey and we have received more than 100 responses. So based on these responses, we have prepared a set of questions. So we'll be asking those questions for the first 40 minutes. From 6:10 to 6:30 for around 25 to 30 minutes, the audience or participants of this webinar can ask questions. So you can type your questions in the chat box. I'll be curating those questions and asking them at the end. So just to make sure that there is not that much of pressure on the bandwidth of the internet and everything, please make sure that your video is on, your sound is on mute and your video is also off. Whenever you want to speak, please unmute yourself. We also have Prerna from the implementation team who is taking notes, a summary of which will be circulated to you after the webinar. This webinar will be recorded and will be available on YouTube and Firki website soon. So this brings me to the introduction section. So let's move on to the question answer session. Like I said, this is going to be, first 40 minutes is going to be questions that we've already received. And the next 20 minutes, the participants can ask questions. We have received over 100 responses. These responses came from teachers, TFI fellows, NGO professionals, entrepreneurs, alumni, parents, and students. So we have divided this into mainly 3 sections. The first one is going to be general questions about TFI, Firki, alumni, fellowship, and around 9 buckets. Then we have rapid fire questions for which Shaheen will be answering in a word or in a sentence, which is going to be very short. Then again, we have the participants question. Okay. So I request Prerna to please share her screen to see which topic we are going to first start with. Okay. Yes, Prerna, you can click to spin the wheel. Okay, Shaheen, the first question is about fellowship. So how does the post-fellowship life look like? What support does TFI give to the ex-fellow? So this is the first question from one of our participants.
Sure. So firstly, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining this call. I think Firki matters a lot to me because teaching matters a lot to me, and the fellowship is really about this idea that teaching is leadership. So to jump into the first question, I think what the fellowship tries to do is give you really foundational and important leadership skills that will set you up to be able to actually do anything at the end of the fellowship, but anything specifically that really benefits children and moves us a little bit closer as a country to educational equity. So we do whatever we can to support our fellows, but really it depends on how much our fellows put in the 2 years, their commitment, how much they learn, that determines the opportunity that they get after the 2 years. A few things that we do: one, we bring a lot of our fellows back onto our own team as we're growing the movement. So we run an internal career fair. We also run an external career fair where we try to source a lot of opportunities for people to go out at all levels of the system and actually impact kids across sectors. So we run that. We also, for our alumni, have a platform called TFI Connect that continues to post opportunities, not just TFI posting opportunities, but the community posting opportunities for each other. So while the fellowship is a very important and core part of our work, really supporting our alumni is another core part of our work, and we have various different programs to enable us to do that.
Thank you, Shaheen. Prerna, you can spin the wheel again. Okay, teacher motivation is the next category. The question from that is, how important is working on building school leadership capacity, and how can we do that better?
I mean, I just think it's one of the most important things that we need to do. Teach for India works in classrooms, so fellows really take responsibility for one group of kids, a subset of kids in the school. But our very, very big hope is that many of our alumni will actually get into school leadership where the change is seen across the school. There isn't nearly enough happening. There are starting school operators, some of them led by our own alumni. So Akanksha today is led by TFI alum Saurabh. The I Teach schools in Pune are led by Soumya, another one of our alumni. We have alumni in Delhi leading schools called the Simple Education Foundation. So the hope is that many, many more alumni will now learn from the few alumni out there, and of course experience across the world on what it takes to start and run an excellent school, and that we'll see many, many more people entering positions of school leadership. There are also wonderful programs in the country that are aiming at equipping and skilling school leaders. So ISLI is one such example where they go in and they actually provide training and support to school leaders.
Right. Thank you, Shaheen. Prerna, again, you can spin the wheel. Educational reforms. Okay. What kind of platform can be made to bring local educational NGOs together and enable dissemination of good, easy, and cheap educational methodologies to teachers in low-income areas?
Yeah, so I mean, one of Teach for India's 3 commitments is the commitment to collective action, very much for this particular reason, that there are so many of us working in the country, about 4 million NGOs in the country, and yet there really is not that much impact when you look at the number of people working. And one of the hypotheses for that is that we're just not investing enough time to work together. So I think there are absolutely like the need for more and more platforms, collectives, people to come together. Having said that, I don't think the question is what is the right platform, but have we understood like where collaboration and collective action actually breaks down? And it breaks down for very human reasons. Actually, the hardest thing in the world is to work together with other people. And that's because we all have very definite ideas. Most of us are not very good listeners. We all have egos. We have ways of doing things. And I think we have to practice what it means to work together so that then these platforms can be more successful and work. At Teach for India, I think Firki is one such platform. So Firki really is populated with knowledge, expertise from a number of different partners. And it's our endeavor to always go out there and see what is out there in the ecosystem and bring it back to the platform for that reason. We have another program called the Kids Education Revolution, which again is a growing collective of organizations that are coming together on a common platform. Really, the idea of reimagining education is what's bringing them together. So each organization, of course, has their own goals, does their own work, but come together for mutual learning. Another example is the Teach for All platform, where like Teach for India, there are now 50 countries in the Teach for All network that come together in many, many different ways to learn from each other. So I think the examples are there, they're starting, but we need many, many more of them.
Thank you, Shaheen. Prerna, again. So the other category that we have is alumni. What is your vision for the alumni movement?
Such a
Broad
beautiful
question.
Yeah. So I'm smiling because the best part, or one of the best parts of what I do, is I keep meeting alumni everywhere I go, and they make me so proud with their dedication and how they're working in such diverse ways. My vision for the alumni movement is that, one, most of our alumni continue to work for children. And not just for any children, but for the children who need it the most in the country. So that's one part of my vision for alumni. The second part of my vision for alumni is that they believe that they are never good enough, and that they are continuously learning, because this work is so complex and hard. So I hope they keep learning, they keep growing in their leadership, and they stay on the path to educational equity for all children. And my hope for alumni, linked to one of the previous questions, is that they really make an effort to work together, that they put aside their egos, their differences, and they say that, like, individually, none of us can make a really big difference in this country for education. The problem is way, way, way too big. We have to learn to work together. So how do we do that?
Thank you. Prerna? Okay, it's fellowship again. What is the impact measurement and reporting pattern of fellowship? How do we do that? Impact measurement and reporting.
So impact is a very, very tricky thing. I want to share a little story. I was visiting one of our alumni last week in Pune, and he works on community development and empowering children in the community to change the community that they live in. And one of the little boys, the same question came up. He's actually part of a group of students that are running a school in the summer that they call Fun School, where the kids are doing everything from fundraising to impact measurement. So this question came up around impact measurement. And he was sharing that he was in a meeting with a person from Credit Suisse. And she was asking him, but how do you measure the impact of what you're doing? And this little boy, I think he's 15 years old, he looked at her and he said, Didi, if you can see change, why do you need to measure change? And she went on sort of pushing him to say, no, but what about the metrics, and how do I know, and investments? And at the end of it, he very respectfully again said, but if you can see change, why do you need to measure change? And I think a lot about that. I think a lot of us, myself included, we're always asking ourselves this question: how do we measure our impact? How do we measure our impact? And yet the work that we do is the work of shifting generations to come. And it's slow work and it's difficult work. Often you can't see the direct impact of what you're doing. So what do we do? Of course, we measure the impact of every kid's reading levels, math levels. Once a year, we do an assessment. We have a tool called the Student Vision Scale, where we look at kids' growth, not just on academics, but on values and exposure. We have surveys. We do a lot of these different things to measure impact. But really, sometimes I tell myself that you can only really see the impact looking back. I mean, I've been doing this work now for 30 years. And today, my students are in college and they're having children and raising their children differently. And they're standing up for the things that they believe in, and they're fighting for people's rights. And like, you see the impact so clearly. But it's a little bit difficult sometimes in this work to see it going forward. Much easier to see it when you connect the dots backwards.
Prerna? We'll take one more question before the rapid fire round. Classroom practices. Okay. Do you think differential class arrangements have counter effect on the learning of students who are not struggling?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah. Do you think differential classroom arrangements have counter effect on the learning of students who are not struggling? Is differentiation important for students who are kind of well off, who are not struggling? They don't need differentiation actually, but is it hampering their learning?
Interesting. So I mean, I would ask the question back to say, does everybody on this call learn in the same way? And are they at the same place in their journey of learning? And it's a very obvious answer that no, we don't learn in the same way, and we're at different places in our journey. And so the idea of differentiation, I think, is the only way to move forward, because we have to move from thinking that as a teacher, I teach a class, to as a teacher, I teach children in a class, and each and every child is different and has a unique need, no matter where they are. There's a distinction between differentiation in its form that makes sense and labeling kids and arranging them level-wise and teaching them differently. My belief is not that, sometimes I hear words like these kids are lower order and these kids are higher order, these kids are brighter, these kids are struggling. I think we have to remove those labels, but I think what we need to do is move towards classrooms where we recognize that student A is strong in math and needs to be pushed to the next level, and student B has really strong confidence, and student C is good at art, and student D is struggling in reading. We have to understand our kids at that level of their learning needs and work with them and have them work with each other to move to the next level. And that to me is what differentiation, or, at Teach for India, we're starting to call it partnership. What does partnership with our students look like? It looks like this beautiful classroom where if a child is a little bit ahead in their math concepts, they are sitting with kids that are 3 steps behind in math. And if a child is very shy, then a child who's confident is encouraging that child to speak up. And if a child is far behind, then another child is giving up their lunchtime to sit with that child. That's the way I see differentiation. And accordingly, how a teacher plans looks fundamentally different than the traditional norm, where we don't plan for a full class, but we really understand our students' needs, and we do more group work, we do more individual work, we use technology in smart ways to try to make sure that are we meeting each child at the place where they are and pushing them.
Now let's move to the rapid fire round. So the norm for this is that you have to answer the question in a word or in a sentence. So we'll keep moving the questions very quick. Prerna, can you please share your screen? Okay, the first question. Yes, Prerna. What is the one essential quality you wish to see in a new teacher?
Love and belief in children.
Perfect. Next question. If not the TFI founder and CEO, what would you have been doing?
I think I would have started an academy for the arts for low-income kids.
Right. Okay. Next question. One thing that you feel would make a classroom interesting?
Lots of different types of activities that cater to different types of learners. So I'd want to see music and drama and PowerPoint and a video and kids moving around all in the same lesson.
Different things happening at the same time in a classroom.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Then our next question. How do you remain so compassionate, peaceful, motivated every day?
Oh my God, what a big compliment. I don't know if this is true firstly, but assuming this is true, I think that the answer is children. I think they drive me every single day. I'm still in touch with children through WhatsApp, through going into classrooms, teaching. But I think the reason I got into this work is kids, and they remain the reason why I'm here every day.
Cool. Next question, Prerna. Why do you choose the title Firki, keeping in mind there are multiple connotations to it?
So I don't know what the multiple connotations are, but the reason I chose Firki is it's not a rapid fire. Can I answer it within a couple of sentences?
Yeah, given.
Because there's a story behind it. Actually, 2009, when we were about to welcome our first fellows in, I wanted a symbol to welcome them with. And I was driving past Chopati Beach and I saw kids running on the beach holding Firkis. And in that moment, I thought how beautiful that symbol is, because every time you look at it, you think of a child. If you think about the colors on the Firki, they represent the colors in each one of us and the colors that are willing to be discovered in each one of us. And most importantly, the Firki spins when the wind comes, which is symbolic of a movement. And we are trying to build a movement for kids. So that was the thinking behind Firki.
Thank you. And we have one more question in this round. Yes, Prerna. If given an opportunity to work in the system, what is the first reform that you will bring in the education sector?
I'd find a way to make sure that no child is mistreated in any school. I think that's the thing closest to my heart. And when I say mistreated, no child is compared, no child is humiliated, no child is shamed, no child is beaten. I would bring about a very strong reform to ensure that.
Perfect. Okay. So with that, we come to the first section of the rapid fire round. We again move to the different buckets of questions. Yes, Prerna, can you spin the wheel again?
Also, if you guys have thoughts while I'm speaking, please feel free to just type them into the chat window so that you don't forget them. Yeah, just
so your questions, please type them down in the chat box. We'll be curating them at the end and then asking. So whenever you have any question, please type them in the chat box. Okay. It's again classroom practices. How do we bring on 21st century skills in everyday classroom teaching?
Oh, I love this question. I think this is the question that I myself am trying to answer. So at Teach for India, we're experimenting with 7 21st century skills right now, and they all start with C. So they're curiosity, compassion, courage, critical thinking, communication, collaboration, and critical thinking. And what I'm trying to think about with each one of them is what are simple practices that we can do again and again and again to build these 21st century skills. So a couple of examples to bring that to life, and I think each of us can think of our own actions to do this. But to build critical thinking as a teacher, one of the things I found really powerful was just the question why. Like asking, no matter what my kids were saying, asking them why, like 50 times each day. And so very soon my kids realized that I was less interested in the answer and I was more interested in the way they had thought to arrive at that answer. So that was a way of building critical thinking, for example. So like that, I think we need to arrive at practices that will genuinely, another thing I did as a teacher is I gave each one of my kids, I made them little wallet-sized books, and we call them good deed diaries. And so the kids had a week to write or draw any good deed that they did in or outside of class. And every week we would sit together and we would just share in a circle the good deeds that we had done and how it made us feel. And that was like one example of a practice to build the core value of compassion, which to me as a teacher was very important to leave my kids with. So I think 21st century skills can be embedded into everything you do. I think you don't need to think about them as a separate class or something that is outside of your core content, but through what you're teaching, and more important than anything else, through who you are. We all know this, but teaching is the most difficult thing in the world because your kids don't care about what you say. They care about what they see and who you are. So they're looking at what you say, what you don't say, what you do, what you don't do, what you choose to call out, what you don't choose to call out. They're really looking at you as a human being and learning from that. So I think a lot of building 21st century skills is in asking ourselves as teachers, like, how courageous am I? How compassionate am I? How much do I think critically? How open-minded am I? You know, and these are the difficult questions that we need to hold for ourselves.
So it's about how do we integrate that in our everyday practices and how we ourselves show those skills. Yes, thank you. Prerna, can you show the next question, next category? Okay, personal challenges and motivation. Which is the most difficult situation or decision you have faced as a teacher or a parent? How did you address it?
I don't know. I feel most difficult is a very, very difficult question to answer. But I think, I mean, maybe what would be more useful is to tell you that when I was much younger and I first started my work, and certainly the first 10 years of my work, everything felt like a big challenge. Even the tiniest things, they felt very, very overwhelming and like very big challenges. And then slowly over time, I began to see, as I became more self-aware, that whenever I let myself think of something as a challenge, it actually became a much bigger challenge. But when I learned to see that challenge actually quite differently, it really became much less of a challenge for me. And I think we see that so much in the world around us with the people that we meet. Just this last Sunday, I was speaking in Lucknow at a TEDx, and the speaker who spoke after me was an athlete who was injured and paralyzed from the chest down. So he's in a wheelchair. He will never get his mobility back. And he was an athlete, right? But he chose to learn swimming after that. And his goal now is to reach the Paralympics and to win in the Paralympics. And he swims like long distance in the oceans, etc. And it was so beautiful what he said. He said for the first 1.5 years after the accident, he just felt so sorry for himself. But then he began to see all the things that he still did have and focus on those things. I think that lens has been a real differentiator for me. So while every year of my career, I think the challenges increase, I think they feel each year slightly smaller than the year before because of that.
We have one question from the participants. So what do you think about arts integration in the curriculum? So what is your opinion about that?
I mean, I think it's one of the most important things in the world. I mean, for me, arts is about fueling your soul, right? Like content fuels our mind and action fuels our hands. But art fuels our soul and sort of lifts us wherever we are at life, however much we have, it lifts us to a very different place. And I think in today's world where the need to express ourselves and to communicate is such an essential and core life skill, there's no really better platform to build that than the arts. So while I worked at Akanksha, we started a program called Art for Akanksha, which initially was like a niche program that some kids opted into. And we saw such dramatic shifts in those kids, their ability to understand themselves, their ability to share who they are with the world, their ability to deal with conflict, their ability to, I mean, just so their confidence levels. These were such profound shifts that we actually mandated the program for every single one of our children. So whatever form of the arts, whether it's taking photography, whether it's street plays, I have found that it is just absolutely essential and core part of education. And my deep hope is that the system actually recognizes that and increases focus on that.
For the participants, make sure that you type your questions here. So we'll be asking those questions in between the call. Prerna, can you spin the wheel again? again, personal challenge and motivation. Has there been a point in your TFI journey where you felt you were badly disappointed by the actions taken within the organization? How did you deal with it?
So many points. And again, I think with years of work, you learn and you change yourself. So I think for many years, when people used to leave the organization, I used to feel very disappointed, very personally hurt. And it's taking me, it's a journey, but taking me a long time to realize that actually so many of the people who have left TFI have gone on and just done many wonderful things, maybe even greater and bigger and more important than what they were able to do at TFI. So I think that was one of the things that I found very challenging. I think the other thing that I find very challenging is anger. So when people respond with a lot of emotion and a lot of anger, I personally struggle not to shut down. And I feel I can hear a lot content-wise, but the way that it's brought up is something that I'm learning to accept different ways that conflict gets raised and gets shared. But yes, many things that are difficult in TFI. And I think energy as well. I think I have less energy certainly than I had 10 years ago. And so the impatience that I feel within myself grows year on year, that, you know, I've been doing this for so long, like, why can't we reach more kids? Why can't we do better things with our kids? Why are some classrooms struggling? There is a lot of impatience in me. That is another area that I think I'm learning to work on.
Then can you spin the wheel again? Okay. With this again, so I think we'll stop with the third question in this category. What has been your experience as being at the forefront of the TFI journey, and what do you consider to be your biggest responsibility in your role?
What is my biggest responsibility?
In this role, as the leader of TFI?
I think it's a very hard question. I think my biggest responsibility is to make sure as a community that we are focused on our vision and our mission, and that we stay pure in our values. I would say that that's the biggest responsibility. Yeah.
We have one question from the participants. What are your thoughts on homeschooling?
I think mixed. I think homeschooling has a very big academic advantage. I think one-on-one learning is a wonderful way to learn. I think the disadvantage of homeschooling, unless you find a way through homeschooling to do that, is the social environment and actually learning a lot of what it takes to integrate into the world. So there may be a risk with homeschooling of isolating a child from the mainstream experience that most kids learn to navigate. Having said that, like with anything, I think there are kids who have the most phenomenal homeschooling experiences, and that there are kids who don't. And I think the other big advantage of homeschooling is the idea of needing to learn within a classroom bothers me a lot. So even as a teacher, I used to always tell my kids, okay, now today on your way home on the bus, read all the hoardings and understand the importance of reading, because now you can read everything that's on the streets, or go home and like teach somebody else this particular concept. So my focus was always on like, how do you get kids to learn that like you actually learn from life, not from a classroom. And I think school is very limiting in that way, whereas homeschooling allows you to really learn from the world and learn beyond, which is a beautiful opportunity with homeschooling.
Pooja is asking a question. So just like how we have tools to measure students' growth, do we have tools to measure fellows' growth? So something about the fellows.
Yeah, I mean, it's more tricky, and it's something we're working on and revising again this year. But we have something called the Fellow Commitment Scale, which marks growth in our fellows on three main commitments: the commitment to personal transformation, the commitment to collective action, and the commitment to educational equity. We also have a tool called the Leadership Development Conversation, which happens every 6 months, which is a forced sort of reflection and step back, and questions are asked to help you on your own understand where and how you've grown. And then, of course, there are ongoing conversations with your manager, with other fellows, with other staff members, so that you're able to see your growth. But predominantly, we also help fellows see that their growth is tied to the growth of their kids. So the model is actually called Teaching as Leadership for that reason. For example, if you have a classroom of 80 children and they all have very different needs, then the kind of skills you learn in planning are skills that are directly translatable to leadership skills that you will need later on in life. So we're trying to draw those connections for fellows to say, the more you serve your children in different ways, the more your growth is accelerated.
So with that, we'll move on to the next rapid fire questions round. Prerna, can you share your screen? Okay, the first question. Does taking all the Firki courses is equivalent to learning best practices of fellowship?
So I would say at this stage, no, because Firki is still in its development stage, and will keep evolving and developing. But what I can confidently say is if you take all the level 1 courses, and very soon in a couple of months, we'll have most of level 2 completed as well, you will have a very, very strong base of strong practices of teaching, and a strong enough base to build upon that on your own. So I really feel like even with level 1, like if you master the level 1 courses, I think you're going to be a much, much stronger teacher than before you actually took those courses.
Next question. One adjective according to you that defines Teach for India.
I think, adjective.
Yeah.
I mean, what came to mind immediately was just sense of possibility and belief. So whatever the closest adjective to that that is what I would choose.
Represents Teach for India. Okay.
Yeah.
What do you like the most when you're not working? I mean, in terms of doing.
I love hanging out with my dog and my daughters, and I love movies and music and lots of things. Lots of things.
So it's not one thing. Okay, Prerna, next question. One failure from which you learned and then you moved on to attain success.
I think one thing that I'm learning, I find these words failure and success very misleading actually, because I don't think anything is a failure as such and anything is a success as such. And I struggle a lot to think of success in the work that I do because there are so many more kids that need to be educated and so much that Teach for India needs to improve in. But I think working on myself has helped me to be more able to stay on this path consistently and do consistently good work. And it's been a lot of just introspection and sort of seeing the things that are not that good in myself. So I can give you an example just from this year. I think I've always thought of myself as someone who's able to listen a lot. And this year, many people in our community helped me to see, as we were going through a bit of a crisis in Teach for India, that actually I was not as empathetic and as good a listener as I thought I was. And initially, I think I was very taken aback because that wasn't the opinion that I had. I thought of myself as a very caring and empathetic person. But when I was able to actually pick up the mirror and understand that, I realized that actually there are many things that I do where I don't see the struggles of the people that I work with, and I'm not aware of the needs as they see them in as important a way as I should be. I think that realization, of course, it's going to be a process to change that about myself and to grow in that area. But that awareness of that, I think, has already helped me and will continue to help me.
Thank you. Then our next question. What's your biggest source of inspiration?
Just when people who live with a lot of difficulty and disadvantage and lack of privilege, when they take positive steps in their life, I find that deeply, deeply inspiring. I think I've become a lot more aware now than I've ever been before of the privilege that I was born with, and how little of where I am I actually deserve because of that. And when I see people who have 100 reasons to give up on themselves and their lives actually take the opportunities that they have and turn around their lives and take positive steps forward, I find it deeply, deeply inspiring.
Then our next question. If you made a parent of a 4th grade child, what would be your first advice to him or her to enable excellent education for the child?
I would say like balance holding your child to really high expectations with giving your child a lot of love.
Balancing high expectations and love. Prerna, next question. Okay, that is with this segment. So we'll ask some questions which the participants have asked. So Arif has asked, what is the relevance of brainstorming activity in the classroom with children?
I think it's a beautiful way to build critical thinking again and to have children explore a topic. So really helping them understand that there is so much to any particular topic. I remember visiting a school once where the entire year they had just worked on the topic of rocks. That was their entire year's curriculum. And they had learned science and math and like values and everything just through rocks because they had thought so broadly about that one topic. So I think brainstorming, goes a long way in just building a child's curiosity and their ability to think critically.
Divya is asking, what does TFI do to build teacher educators? How a teacher educator should be when the focus is on the holistic development of a child?
So, I mean, we have a continuous focus on improving the practices of our fellows and holding our fellows to those expectations. And we do that through in classroom coaching. We do that through Firki as a platform and refining and adding courses that people can access so that they can become self-learners. We do that through one-on-one conversations. We do that through facilitating group learning, where fellows can learn a lot from each other. They can learn from fellows teaching the same grade level, the same subject level. We do that by bringing in people from outside of education to talk to us so that we can make connections and learn from leaders across different sectors. We do that by recommending books, articles. So I think just thinking again of different types of learners and how broadly can you get people really excited about learning? Because once you're excited about learning, the platforms today to access learning are massive. You just take a platform like TED, for example, and you could have a whole lifetime or multiple lifetimes of learning just from watching TED Talks. So I think today we have no excuse as learners that we need to have money or we need to be in a particular country to be able to learn. Like learning is at our fingertips. We just have to be open to learning.
So we have another 15 minutes. So participants, if you have any questions, please type them down in the chat box. So next question is from Nisha. She's asking, will the rubrics that they use to measure fellow growth give them enough liberty to be creative and work on their pace?
See, creativity is an interesting thing, right? Because as a first-year teacher, you have a massive responsibility to your kids, and you're not going to be good when you start. And so I think creativity comes with time, but actually learning from existing best practice and what has worked with children and trying that and demonstrating that and showing that that works, I think is better advice than starting your teaching experience wanting to be creative. And I'm not saying like follow, like if your school tells you like pick up a textbook and teach from it, of course not. But learn from people that have already done it for years, and slowly as you start seeing shifts with your kids, start experimenting more would be my advice. So I actually think what the rubrics help you do is become and experience early success, and then there's nothing binding you, like the Firki courses, right? Why do the Firki courses? Just because they give you a base. They're not going to make you the best teacher in the world, but they're going to give you a very solid base. And with that base, you have the opportunity to become a better and better teacher.
Okay. Shyama is asking, what do you think one can do with super defined classrooms? Like, how do you inculcate anger management and self-control?
I mean, this is such a pressing problem for teachers, and there's just no easy answer. The first thing is, if you are a teacher out there struggling with your kids and management, look after yourself. I actually think that's one of the most important things, because it's so demoralizing to go home every day and feel like you've tried so hard and your kids just didn't care and they were defiant. So look after yourself, hold your belief, keep it intact. The second thing is, I think, have a lot of conviction in the strategies that you try. They will take time to work, but consistency and conviction is very, very important. So if you tell your kids, for example, I will only answer if your hand is up, then don't answer them if their hands are down, because they'll never learn that, right? And then day after day, like the class will become more and more unruly. So I used to just stop class if my kids didn't listen. And I would tell them that I don't want you to listen for me. I want you to listen for you. You're not here to learn from me. You're here to learn because it's important for you. And so we're just going to stop. And when you're ready to learn, we will start again. And in the beginning, it didn't work, but then over time, it would work. I would also try to use a lot more like positive methods than consequences. Like, I actually don't think that consequences work in the medium to long term. Yes, in the beginning, kids are scared and so they will listen. But I think calling out the child that is listening is giving a very strong message to the other kids rather than yelling at the child who isn't listening. So that would be another thing. I would always, children who are misbehaving, I would tell them in their ear, I would literally go and whisper to them, I would really love it if you could listen to me. But kids who were behaving well, I would make that very public, my praise of them, so that other kids could understand. And I think you just have to have patience, try the same things, and know that it is going to work. Hundreds and thousands of teachers have been in your shoes before, but they've held on to their belief, their practices, and their kids will listen. And I think the other part of an unruly class is really asking yourself, am I doing the right things as a teacher? Like, are my classes being planned well enough? Are my classes interesting enough? Because if they're not, of course your kids are going to misbehave, right? And you only have yourself to blame. So I think really asking and looking at your own actions and how you can become a better teacher is directly linked to how well your kids behave.
Divya has a question. She's asking, is there any way we can assess values?
I mean, so hard. Like, people around the whole world are asking this question. There are things, maybe Shivani, if you're still on the call, you can put in the chat window the Skill Builder website. But there are tools like Skill Builder that are sort of rubrics to assess values, but it's still at the level that requires a lot of observation of individual children and shifts in their behavior. And then there are some tests now, which you can find online as well, that will test particular values and competencies. But I think it really, the measurement of values and holistic outcomes is in its very, very nascent stages, and hopefully will evolve in the next 5 years.
Okay. Diksha is asking, what are the ways we can help fellows network? So there are a lot of online platforms, but then she feels that there should be more collaboration offline. So what can be done for that?
I mean, just make good friends with other teachers is what I would say. They will really keep you going. One day you'll have a good day, one day they'll have a good day, and you can pull each other up. So I would say really invest in building relationships with a core group of educators, ideally people in your school. If that's not possible, then nearby, people who will be there for you, people who you can meet often, people who you can let your hair down with. It makes a massive, massive difference, because it's very hard for someone who's not a teacher to understand the struggles that you're going through. So I would say don't worry about having hundreds of friends. Like, this is not about like Instagram and getting like thousands of people to follow you and your classroom practices that you post online, but really saying like, do I have 3 to 5 people that I can reach out to, be really honest with about what I'm doing and how I can get better, and who will give me support and inspiration to keep going on.
The questions also around working with other fellows to scale up the projects that the fellows work during the fellowship. So how can fellows collaborate during the time, mostly offline, not only online? So how can they do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you just have to like do that. I mean, you have to first, I think, learn to be okay asking for help and reaching out. So some of us, I know I grew up as a painfully shy child. So if I had heard this advice, I never would have had the guts to reach out to people that I don't know. But use the existing forums that TFI or your school has to meet people, chat with people, get to know people, ask for help, ask people who have like-minded interests, arrange a meeting, sit down together, brainstorm, build relationships. Like, there's no real simple answer to it. I think it's just a question of getting out there and putting yourself out there and doing that. Yeah.
Shilpi is asking, what advice would you give for teacher trainers in terms of qualities or best practices or resources?
So I think, I mean, one of the things I would say to teacher trainers is please keep teaching for at least a part of your time, because I think very soon we move very far away from the ground and we lose touch with the everyday struggles that a teacher goes through. So find ways to stay connected to students, classrooms, communities, so that your practice keeps developing as a teacher trainer. The second bit of advice I would have is learn along with the teachers that you're training. So move again away from I'm the expert, you're the learner, to how are we learning together, how are we growing together, because then that mindset will translate into how your teachers work with students as well. The third is, I would say, just love and be passionate about teacher training, right? Like, are you curious? Are you looking up like ways to become a stronger teacher trainer? Are you looking up adult facilitation techniques? Are you trying to find a mentor who's a stronger teacher trainer right now than you are? Are you reading books? Are you reading articles? Are you keeping your own mind fresh? Curiosity and continuous learning would be 2 values I would feel are very, very important for a teacher trainer.
Pooja is asking, what kind of importance does the organization give to BTCPs by fellows, and what support structures do we have in place for BTCPs?
So I think, again, like the fellowship is trying to, and my hope is it does even more of this, make fellows more independently able to access the support that they need, right? So for BTCPs today, for example, if you have a particular idea, you can go onto the TFI Connect platform. You can find alumni working. Say, for example, your BTCP is about setting up libraries, or it's about teacher training. You can go online onto TFI Connect. You can find alumni working in teacher training. You can decide to spend your summer internship working with them. You can reach out to other fellows that are working in that particular area. So my strong push would be, while of course the organization does some things, right, and we have some sessions and some resources, and we'll continue to strengthen our programs, really as a fellow, there is nothing stopping you from finding ways to be supported all the time. Like, I always tell people that I would never outsource my development to anybody. Like, it's too important to me. Like, I have to maintain control of it. So I would never want to hold one person, whether it's my board member or my manager or responsible for my development. I would want to create an ecosystem of support around me. So if, for example, right now, I'm really interested in learning about how groups of people respond in areas of conflict, then I will try and find someone who knows about that to learn from. I will try to find a book to read about that. So whatever you deeply care about, how do you create an ecosystem of support for yourself that is stable, that isn't over-dependent on any one person, or over-dependent on TFI, to be able to actually do that?
Prajwal is asking, is it good to have a village level curriculum to which village kids can relate to?
Absolutely. So I think that the broader question embedded in that is, how important is context, right? And can we take the curriculum from one area and transplant it into another area? My answer is yes and no. I think there are some dimensions of curriculum, learning, teaching that are common, whether you're in a small rural village or whether you're in a big urban city, or whether you're in Armenia or India or the US. And then there are many elements that are different and require curriculum to change and be contextualized. I was always asking myself as a teacher, like, does what I'm teaching actually matter to my kids? Like, do they care about it? Is it relevant for them? And I think asking that question helps us as educators adapt any curriculum to be truly meaningful for the kids and for the context that we work within.
Priyadarshini is asking, what are the key factors to ensure sustainability of any idea project?
Sustainability of any
idea project, yeah. So you're going to start something. How do you ensure that it's sustainable?
I mean, I think the only thing that ensures sustainability is your conviction to keep going with it. Like, everything else you can figure out. But the real question is, on those days when your kids are driving you crazy in class, or on those days when your organization is running out of money, or on those days when 100 people are questioning your idea, like, how deeply do you believe in it? And are you going to stick with it? And I think if you are, it is going to be sustainable. Not to say it's not going to have problems. It's going to be up and down. Everything I've done has been like a roller coaster. But the reality is, I will not give up because I believe in what I'm doing. And so I'm here and I will see it through and I'll find a way. And maybe TFI will look very different 2 years from now, but working for that vision, that mission, that idea, how important is it and how clear are you about that, right? So as a teacher, how much do you obsessively want your kids to learn, no matter what? Whether your manager is good, whether your infrastructure is good, whether your curriculum is good, those all are important. But they're not deal breakers. Like, if you say, no matter what, like, even if it was me on a desert island, I would keep teaching these kids, then nothing can stop that. That becomes sustainable.
That amount of conviction you have in your project and everything. So it's 6:28. So we're going to ask the last question. This question is from Ruchita. How do you pull yourself back or gather strength when you feel very low or unmotivated? Demotivated?
Such an important question. I mean, my strong advice for everyone on the call is ask yourself that question, because once you have the answer for yourself, it's just so helpful to have that answer. And like what I do is very different from what all of you need. So we have to find our own answers. But a few things that I do personally, one is I have one or two people in my life who I just know will unconditionally love and support me no matter what. And I think that's the biggest source of support, through ups and downs, just knowing that like I can be like fully myself with these people, and they will still love me and believe in me despite mistakes I make, or the way I respond, or how I am. The second is, I've learned the value of just spending a little bit of time with myself every day. And while my life is busy, not making it too busy and finding spaces for reflection, introspection, making meaning of my day and what I'm going through. I think that's really helpful. The third for me is just children. Like when I lose faith in a particular thing or have a particularly bad day, I just know that if I go back and spend time with kids, my energy will be refueled. And I feel the same way around animals. So for me, it's animals, children, having a couple of people who I can talk to, and just time with myself.
Thank you so much, Shaheen. So we're just going to close out. It's already like 6:30. So we have received much more questions. So please write to contact Firki@teachforindia.org if your questions are not answered yet. We'll somehow get Shaheen to spend time on those questions and answers.
I'm really happy, Ellie, if you take even the questions that weren't answered in the chat window and mail them to me, I will definitely respond to all of them. So apologize to those of you who didn't get your questions answered on this call, but I will put down a response to them, and we'll send that back to you.
Also, Shaheen, can you please share your thoughts on this call and the questions and answers? How was this entire experience for you, this last 1 hour?
Sure. I mean, just firstly, a huge thank you to you for moderating. I know it's not easy to moderate. When we were talking about this yesterday, and we knew that there were so many participants and so many questions. So I really love the creativity of the spin the wheel. Like that could be a really great thing to do in class also for teachers. And I really enjoyed the rapid fire round, and think we covered a lot of ground. Of course, there's so much to ask and so much to share. And I wish I could have heard a lot more from everybody on the call as well. But just a big, big thank you.
Thank you so much, Ashwath and Prerna, also for arranging everything. So thank you so much, participants. Please take 2 minutes to share your feedback as well. We'll be collecting all these questions and then sending it to Shaheen, so she'll be spending some time answering those. Thank you so much. And the next webinar is on 8th of August. So please join the webinar as well. Thank you.
Thank you.